Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Nikki, and today's video is just going to be some random, healthy, and simple recipes that I've been enjoying lately. I am starting up a new challenge where I'm back to focus on tracking everything that I eat, but that's not really going to change the way that I'm eating, more so just focusing on portions and snacking and stuff like that. So I still keep meals very simple. I try to limit the amount of ingredients, but also pack them with lots of fruits, veggies, proteins, all the 0-point foods that I can. And today I'm just going to be sharing some random recipes that I've been enjoying that are like that. I'll be giving the WeightWatchers points for everything, and I don't even actually know every recipe I'm going to be including when I'm filming this right now, but there are so many times when I'm making a meal and I feel like it's too simple to make like a recipe video out of it, but it also is helpful to see how I can make things with just a few things that still help me to hit my goals. So I wanted to make this video to just show some of those simpler recipes that are just quick and easy to throw together, and I'll just be talking through them as I make them. So I hope you guys enjoy this video and find it helpful. If you do, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I'm making today is taco flatbreads. I've got this 93% lean ground turkey, and I'm making a bigger batch of it, so it's just prepped in the fridge. So I've got 2 pounds of that cooking up on the stove while I chop up some peppers that I'm going to be putting on the top of my flatbreads. I just used a couple sweet peppers and then a jalapeno from the garden, and as the meat continues to cook, I love to use this little masher to get it into nice uniform smaller pieces. A lot of the times I've already got some pre-made veggie mix made, so that makes it even easier to throw this together, but I'm just chopping the veggies that I have today. I strain the ground turkey and then I add some water to it. I continue to mash it into smaller pieces, and then I've got 2 packets of this Taco Bell taco seasoning. They've got a few different flavor options for them. I usually get them at Walmart, but I like the mild one the best. I continue to cook it for a few minutes after I add the seasoning, and then I'm getting the sauce that I'm going to be putting on the pita ready. So I use this queso. I got it from Aldi, and I'm just using my food scale to weigh out a 2-point serving, as well as mixing it with some medium salsa I just made at home in my blender. I've got my oven preheating to 375, and then I've just got a tray here that I put 2 of the pitas on. They're from Aldi as well, and they're whole wheat, 1 point per pita. I divide up the cheese sauce equally onto each pita, I just spread it out, and then I top it with some of the finished meat that's done cooking. And the meat is 0 points on WeightWatchers and helps to make this more filling and add more protein, so I add a decent amount to each pita. Then I top it with the sweet peppers I chopped up. Using my food scale, I weigh out a 2-point serving of reduced fat mozzarella cheese and just divide that up onto each pita. Then I top it with the chopped up jalapenos. I drizzle each one with some Taco Bell mild sauce, which is 0 points, and then I pop them in the oven until the cheese is nice and melted. Usually it ends up being 12 to 15 minutes, and then I cut it into slices so it's almost like a little pizza, and that's it. Next up, I'm making a simple variation of sesame noodles, which if you guys have been following me for a little, you know this is one of my all-time favorite meals. I love the Thai wheat noodles from Trader Joe's, and it's so easy to just combine them with some protein and vegetables and a sauce to make a really filling and tasty meal. So today I am making it using this shiitake mushroom chicken from Trader Joe's. I start by just cooking the chicken from the bag, and usually Adam and I split a bag of this from Trader Joe's. It's 4 points for half of it. If we're not as hungry, we would get 3 servings out of this meal today, but we decided to make it 2, which it came out to 12 points for each serving. So I've just continued to cook the chicken until it's no longer frozen, and then I added the vegetables in that came with the package. I also bulked it up today by adding some green bean, corn, pea, carrot mixture from the freezer. And I did add a splash of soy sauce to that while it was cooking. Now I'm just using my kitchen scissors to cut the chicken into smaller pieces because a lot of the time they're a little big. Same with the mushrooms, I chopped up those a little bit. I add the 2 packets of Thai wheat noodles and then pour the sauce pack that came with the chicken. I kind of like to cover the noodles with the veggie and meat just so that it cooks a little faster, and then I flip them over after a couple minutes because they take a little bit till they can separate. Once they've been in there for a few minutes, I just flip them over using my tongs, and then you'll see that they start to actually break apart, and then I can just mix them together with the vegetables and chicken. And then that is everything. And like I said, this can make a really filling 2-portion meal, or sometimes we just end up having 3 portions. We have 1 for leftovers when we use 2 packs of the Thai wheat noodles. Sometimes I forget that I can have breakfast for dinner and it's what I'm craving at that time of day, so that's what I'm doing here. I've got this nutsnmore pancake mix that I actually haven't even tried before. Sometimes I'll use the Aldi protein pancake mix or the brand Kodiak, but today I decided to try this one out and I'm just mixing it with some egg and vanilla. I thought it was interesting that I didn't have to add any water or anything, but it seemed like the perfect consistency, so I did have my griddle heating up so I could start those pancakes. I wanted to make sure I was getting enough protein, so I decided to make a hash brown egg scramble as well, and I'm using these Simply Potato shredded hash browns, which are 0 points on WeightWatchers. I always let them cook in the pan for a little before I add the veggies or anything, but I do add some garlic butter seasoning and onion powder, and I mix that to combine. While the hash browns are cooking, I start the pancakes on the heated up griddle, and I just wanted to get 6 out of the batch. That's how many it said it would make, although I did kind of mess up how I was scooping here. But it worked out, and I just let those sit until they started to bubble, and then they were ready for me to flip them over. Then for the hash brown mix, I did chop up some sweet peppers that I mixed in, as well as I'm just ripping up some spinach here. I had already almost forgotten about my pancakes, but flipped them over at the perfect time, and they were actually looking pretty good. Then once the peppers and spinach have cooked for a little with the potatoes, I scramble up some eggs that I'm going to be just mixing in with the hash browns. And I usually just keep it at a medium heat. I added some salt and pepper as well, but once I pour the eggs in, I pretty much just continually stir them while they are cooking. I'm pretty picky about my eggs and I don't like them to get too overdone, so that's why it just works best for me to just mix them the entire time they're cooking. And especially when I have spinach and eggs, I like to add some type of cheese. So today I had this thin sliced cheddar that I'm just breaking up and mixing into the eggs and potatoes. So I just divided the hash brown egg mixture into 2 equal portions, one for me and one for Adam, and then we also split the pancakes. I had heated up some chicken sausages as well. Sometimes I'll cook them on the stove, but these ones I just microwaved. But I chopped up the chicken sausages and I added half to the egg mixture and then half to my pancakes, which I also topped with some fresh raspberries and blueberries. Whenever I do a dollop of whipped cream like this, I don't usually count it. It's one of those mental weeklies, so I have that as well. And then I did add some sriracha to my eggs. I feel like I've shared this recipe a decent amount, but it is always one of my favorites, one that I usually make once a week, and that is tuna noodles. There are a lot of times where I'll just kind of mix up what cheese or vegetables I use, but roasted red peppers are always my favorite to use for this, so that's what I started by chopping up. And I had just gotten those from Trader Joe's. Then I have 2 cans of tuna that I drained and I'm adding some seasoning to. I've got this garlic parmesan seasoning, some garlic powder. Then to add a little extra protein and creaminess, I add some non-fat plain Greek yogurt and also some salt and pepper, and I just mix that together till it's combined. I've had some water boiling, so I add some protein pasta. I'm just using the brand Barilla. Once it's done cooking, I strain it and add the tuna mixture to it, as well as the chopped up roasted red peppers. I mix it all together until it's combined, and then I usually let it cook for a few minutes extra on the stove, just so that the roasted red peppers and tuna can get heated up a little. I add some grated Parmesan cheese, and then the only things that I need to track for this recipe are the pasta and the cheese. Everything else is 0 points. This next recipe has become a favorite of mine for both breakfast and dessert. I made a variation of it in my 0 point day, and it's just become one of my favorites now. I start by mashing up a banana, and then to that I add an egg and 2 tablespoons of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. I add a little bit of vanilla and then 2 teaspoons of caramel sugar-free syrup. I just mix that all together until it's combined, and I add a good amount of cinnamon as well. I kind of like to add extra to mine. To that mixture, I add some extra cinnamon, a half teaspoon of baking powder, a half cup of oats, and I used old-fashioned oats. Then I've got 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and I mix that together until it's all combined into one. Like I said, I like a lot of cinnamon, so I added even more. Then I start chopping up an apple, and I've just got a Honeycrisp apple here. I don't usually like to peel it, but you definitely could if you prefer that. I just dice it up into smaller pieces, and I have had my oven preheating to 350. Once I mix the apples in, I've got my baking dish that I spray with some nonstick cooking spray. This is 8x6x2, and I just get it from IKEA. It's the same one I use for my pizza bakes. So I just kind of flatten that out and then top it with a little bit of cinnamon roll topper from Flavor God and pop that in the oven. And my favorite part of this has actually been the yogurt drizzle on top. So I'm actually using a 0 serving of this vanilla Greek yogurt mixed with some cinnamon and a little bit of that sugar-free caramel syrup. I just mix it together and then I put it in an icing bag. I've got a bunch of extra ones for my cookie business that I can't use for it, so I like to use those to drizzle things onto desserts and stuff like that. I swear sometimes taking some extra time to make the presentation nice just makes it more fun, sustainable, and it's something that I always enjoy doing. So that's why I like to do the drizzle, but once this came out of the oven, I did not let it wait long enough to cool. So the bottom did stick when I popped it out, but I was able to just scrape it and pop it right back on. Then I flipped it over and put the yogurt drizzle that I made. And that's it. This entire thing is 2 points on WeightWatchers. It's super filling. Sometimes I just have half in the morning and half at night, or I'll eat the entire thing at once, but that's it. One of my go-to meals, whether I'm on track or not, is a snack plate. It's so easy to throw them together, and especially when I want to pack them with 0 foods, I can make them more filling. So the one I'm making today, I started by washing some red grapes and raspberries, and I just put those in a bowl. I've also got some Grillo's pickle spears. Then I've got this rotisserie chicken lunch meat from Sam's Club, so I use a good amount of that to get some protein in today. So far everything's 0 points. Then I've got this light Baby Bell cheese, which is 2 points on WeightWatchers. I got these Parmesan garlic pita chips from Aldi, and I just used my food scale to weigh out a 4-point serving of them. Then I scoop out 2 tablespoons of this sweet chili garlic hummus from Walmart. It's 2 points for that serving. And I feel like snack plates always take me a little bit longer to eat. They're super filling and satisfying, and they just satisfy the craving I have for snacky foods like this. I was really craving some spaghetti and meatballs, and I had some ground beef in the fridge and asparagus that I needed to use up, so that made the perfect meal. I've got a tray here that I sprayed with some nonstick spray. I spread out the asparagus and spray it again with the nonstick olive oil spray. Then I top it with different seasonings, including salt and pepper, roasted garlic and herb, and then a little bit of garlic parmesan. I pop that in the oven at 400 to let it roast, and then I start getting the meat ready for the meatballs, which is 93% lean ground beef. I season it with some garlic parmesan seasonings as well as onion salt. Then I added 1 egg and some panko breadcrumbs, and I just put on some gloves and used my hands to mix it together. I wanted to get 15 meatballs so that I could get 3 servings of 5, so I just used my food scale to weigh out equal portions once the meat was combined. And the way I do this is I just put the bowl onto my food scale, I zero it out, I add the entire portion of meat, and then whatever that is in either grams or ounces, I divide by 15 because that's how many servings I want, and then that's how much each meatball will weigh. Then once each one is weighed out, I just roll them together to form more of a ball shape with them. And then once those are done, I can start cooking them. I do have a pan heating up on the stove. I add the meatballs one at a time, and I just try to kind of space them out a little bit. I find that they do cook better when I actually cover them. So once they're all in the pan, I just put a lid on them and I let them cook for a couple minutes. Then every few minutes, I just take the lid off and move them around so that each side gets cooked evenly. I honestly switch off between cooking meatballs in the oven and the stove, but I think I usually prefer eating them when I cook them on the stove, so it is easier in the oven, but it's just whatever preference you have. And those don't take too long to cook. I usually, again, continue to just move them around until each side has browned. And then I've also made sure to check on the asparagus cooking in the oven. Once the meatballs are fully cooked, I add a can of tomato sauce and then a can of strained diced tomatoes. Both of these things I just got from Trader Joe's, and they're 0 points on WeightWatchers. Using the tongs, I just try to coat the meatballs in the sauce. I add some roasted garlic and herb seasoning as well as some salt and pepper, and I just continue to mix those around and let the sauce heat up. And while those have been cooking, I've had some water boiling. So I actually had a box that was not all the way full of angel hair pasta and spaghetti. It's just both the Barilla Protein Plus pasta, but I cooked the rest of that and continued to cook the meatballs while the pasta was cooking. Then once the pasta was done, I just divided it into the equal portions. I've got a 6-point serving here on WeightWatchers, and then I top it with a good amount of the tomato sauce. The meatballs are actually 0 points on WeightWatchers. I used a little bit of panko, but it wasn't enough to track, so for 5 of them, it's 0 points. The tomato sauce is also 0. And then the asparagus is also 0 points on WeightWatchers. I did decide to top this with some shredded Parmesan, so I did put a point divided up onto the asparagus and pasta, but that is it for 7 points on WeightWatchers. I had to include at least one recipe with 2-ingredient dough, and this is seriously one of my all-time favorite meals. I'm making 2-ingredient dough barbecue chicken pizza bakes, and I'm actually making some extra 2-ingredient dough pitas today, so I double up the batch, but I use 1 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, a teaspoon of baking powder, and then some different seasonings of my choice depending on what type of meal I'm making with it. But like I said, I doubled that up today so that I could have some extra pitas for the week. But once I've got all the ingredients in a bowl, I just put on some food gloves and then mix the ingredients together until it forms a dough. I realized I didn't add enough Greek yogurt. Sometimes it's a little bit on the dry side, so you have to add a little bit more, which is just what I did until it's the perfect dough consistency. Using my food scale, I weigh out the equal portions of dough, and I usually do half a batch per pizza bake, which is 9 points for the serving. Unless I use whole wheat flour, then it's 7 points. And I'm using the same baking dishes that I used to make the oat bakes from earlier. These are so perfect for pizza bakes. I just spray them with a good amount of nonstick cooking spray, and then you can put the dough into each one. And sometimes it's a little bit easier if I kind of flatten it out with my hands before I push it into the actual baking dish, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and I just try to make it as even as I can. And you don't have to do this step, but I have found that I just prefer it when I make any of these pizzas, and that's just par baking the dough before I add all the toppings. So I've already had the oven preheating to 400 degrees, and once I've got the dough portioned out for each crust, I just put it in the oven and let it cook for 10 minutes, and then I add the toppings to it. I feel like as a pizza bake, these are kind of doughy enough, so par baking the dough helps to make them just a little bit less doughy. I also just wanted to include making the pitas, so this is what I do. I divide the portion that I had in each pizza bake in half so that they're just smaller pitas, and then I flatten them out with my hand and put them on a baking sheet and pop them in the oven. For the toppings of this barbecue chicken pizza bake today, I'm using this pulled chicken from Sam's Club. It's 0 points on WeightWatchers. Then to make them barbecue, I add some type of no sugar added barbecue sauce. Today I'm using the Sweet Baby Ray's, which is definitely one of my favorites. I mix that up until the chicken is pretty coated in the barbecue sauce, and then I've also got these pickled red onions that I just made. I chopped up a red onion and put it in the pickle juice from Grillo's that I had after I finished the container of pickles. So I take the crust out of the oven after they've par-baked for 10 minutes, and then I top them with that barbecue chicken that I have, as well as some of the pickled red onions. Then I'm using some reduced fat shredded cheese. So I've got some reduced fat shredded cheddar and mozzarella. And I just weigh it out by putting the entire bag on the scale, zeroing the scale, and then taking out the serving that I need. I add the pickled onions, and then one of my favorite parts about this is adding some crispy onions. So these are 1 point for the serving of 1.5 tablespoons, and I just add that serving to each pizza bake. They add a nice crunch and some really good onion flavor as well as some saltiness. Then to each pizza, I add a drizzle of that no sugar added Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce, and I pop them back in the oven for another 20-25 minutes or so, just until the bottom of the crust is brown and the cheese is all nice and melted. I had some ingredients in the fridge that I needed to use up, but was also specifically craving something pizza-like, so I decided to do a pizza rice bowl. I had some rice already cooked in the fridge, so I took a 5-point serving and just weighed it out using my food scale and added that to my bowl. I wanted to get this pepperoni crispy in the air fryer, so I just cut it up using some kitchen scissors and popped it in to cook for a few minutes. Then to the rice, I had added some veggie mix, which is some cooked pepper, onion, and zucchini that I had prepped in the fridge. I also had this grilled chicken breast that I'm cutting up using my kitchen scissors. Then to make it even more filling and packed with protein, I had this chicken burger that I'm also just cutting up using my kitchen scissors. And everything I have here so far was just prepped in the fridge, so it is cold and I'm just going to pop it in the microwave to heat up. But I did want to add the pizza sauce too, so I had this in the fridge as a leftover that I needed to use up. It's also 0 points on WeightWatchers. I microwaved that for about 2 minutes, then I added the pepperoni that was done in the air fryer, as well as a serving of reduced fat mozzarella cheese, and then that was my pizza rice bowl. I used 3 points of mozzarella, 1 of the turkey pepperoni, and then 5 for the jasmine rice. This next dish is one that I made recently for the first time, and it was so good that I had to make it as soon as possible. It is a green bean casserole inspired pasta. If you didn't want to add meat, you could definitely double up the green beans, but I did want to add some extra protein to this, so I've got some ground chicken that I'm cooking up first. I've got some water boiling for the pasta that I'm making, which is just the Barilla Protein Plus penne pasta. And I just cook that while I continue to cook this ground chicken. Once the ground chicken has cooked enough, I strain the liquid out and then I use my meat masher to mash it into smaller pieces. I season the ground chicken with some garlic butter Kinder seasoning and some onion powder. I also add some garlic salt as well as pepper, and I just mix that all to coat the meat. You could add fresh green beans to this recipe, but for my personal preference, I've always preferred the French style green beans that come in a can. I think I just grew up on these green beans specifically, especially with green bean casserole, and that's what I really enjoy with this meal. But again, it's just whatever you prefer. It's nice and easy to mix these recipes up. I add 1 can of strained green beans and then 3 light Laughing Cow wedges, as well as a 1/3 cup of fat-free milk. I just continue stirring that around on medium heat until the Laughing Cows start to melt, and you kind of have to smash them down, but then they start to combine with the milk and the green beans, and then I just add the strained pasta that was done cooking. Then I've got those crispy onions again, which I feel like always remind me of green bean casserole specifically. To this, I add 3 tablespoons of them for 2 points on WeightWatchers. I ended up getting 2 equal portions of this, and each one came out to 9 points on WeightWatchers. I had more of the pulled chicken that I needed to use up from Sam's Club, so I decided to make a barbecue chicken rice bowl with it. I weighed out my 5-point portion of cooked jasmine rice, which is about 135 grams. Then to that, I add some cooked veggie mix, which is pepper, onion, and zucchini that I prepped earlier in the week. There were some big chunks in the pulled chicken, so I did try to just break those up into smaller pieces, and then I mixed in some of that sugar-free Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. Once the chicken was pretty coated, I just added that to the bowl. Then I've got a prepped chicken burger that I had cooked in the fridge, so I just diced that up into smaller pieces and add it to the bowl as well. I popped that in the microwave for about 2 minutes to heat everything up, and then while that's cooking, I chop up some pickles as well as some of those pickled red onions. This is where it's really nice to be able to have the same ingredients, but for a bunch of different meals. You can really mix up what you use them for, but as you can see, I'm using a lot of the same ingredients that I've already used in a few other recipes in this video. But anyway, I wanted to top my bowl with the sauce, so I've got some of this everything bagel seasoned Bolthouse ranch that I mix with a little bit of the no sugar added Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue, and I just add it to this icing bag and mix it together with my hand. Once the bowl is done cooking, I take it out of the microwave and I add the chopped up pickled red onions as well as the chopped up pickles. I also wanted to add some cheese to this, so I decided to use some reduced fat shredded cheddar cheese. I weighed out a 2-point serving, which was 20 grams. And then I topped it with 1 point of these crispy onions, which is a tablespoon and a half. I drizzled it with that barbecue ranch that I made, and that was it. It came out to 5 points for the rice, 1 for the crispy onions, and 2 for the cheese, making this entire thing 8 points on WeightWatchers. This next meal is always a favorite of both Adam and I's. It is an enchilada bake, and you can really mix it up with whatever meat you want to use. Today I'm using ground beef that I'm going to turn into taco meat, but you could also do shredded chicken or ground turkey, ground chicken. So while I've got the meat cooking, I combine a can of strained corn with a can of pinto beans, and I do have my oven preheating to 350 right now. I add some garlic salt and onion powder as well as cumin to this bean and corn mix, and I just mix it together until it's combined. I continue cooking the ground beef on the stove, and then once it's more cooked, I use my meat masher to break it down into smaller pieces. And I'm actually making 2 pounds of ground beef here so that I've got some extra taco meat for the week. So I do add 2 packets of taco seasoning with the water. I mix that until the meat is fully coated, and then I let that simmer for a couple minutes while I get the baking dishes set up. And again, I'm just using the same baking dishes that I used earlier for my pizzas. I'm making 2 dishes today, so in each one I divide up this bean and corn mixture, and there was just a little bit too much, so I saved some that'll be perfect to add to a wrap or a rice bowl later in the week. I'm using these La Banderita low-carb tortillas. Each one is 1 point on WeightWatchers, so each bake is getting 2 of them. To each tortilla, I add a good amount of veggie mix, so that's just the pepper, onion, and zucchini that I made. Then I add a good amount of that cooked ground beef to each one. And the ground beef is 0 points on WeightWatchers, so I don't ever really measure it or weigh it out, but I would say I use around 2 ounces on each one. Once they've got the meat and veggies, then I wrap them up nice and tightly, and I add them to each baking dish. I pretty much just lay them on top of the corn and bean mixture. There's a couple different options for sauces or salsa that you can use. One of my favorites is this enchilada sauce from Trader Joe's. It's 1 point for up to a half cup of it. So I drizzle that onto each wrap, and then I've got this reduced fat shredded cheese that, again, I just use my food scale to weigh out. I put the bag of cheese on the scale and then take it from there. Then I pop them in the oven and let them bake for about 10 minutes. I rotate them, bake them for another 10 or so, and then that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time.